Hi, this is Dan Lyle, the author of Creative Theology and the founder of the Church of Godly Creativity. And this is the second of my short videos giving an overview of creative theology. This one focuses on the basis for this enabling religious methodology. Now, the basis of creative theology are 15 substantial and unique ebooks that I have authored. First of all, it's theology, which means God, and there has to be a realistic basis for believing in this God. And this is presented in my book, The God Debate. So if we want a theology, it has to be very strongly based. And when we look at a debate between equally intelligent people, giving each side of the question for and against God, we find something rather spectacular. And we arrive at profound conclusions that lead us to the idea of creative theology. Now, in my book of Lyle, this is my own personal autobiographical spiritual adventure book. And in this book we go back to the very beginning of humanity, while retaining everything that we know now, but starting again with the idea of God and theology. And we take a fresh look at the whole thing and then say, where do we end up with this analysis? And we end up with a completely different perspective that's far more interesting than the traditional things we've been led to believe, in that we are freed from the tyranny of success. What's that mean? Well, that's very profound, a profound conclusion, and it leads to a celebration of the true meaning of life. And through this process, I developed the concept of creative theology. That then is detailed in my book of the same name and tells us the how. The how to happily put together faith and science. The how to really empower all the people who are working with us and together to please God. The how to simplify but tremendously challenge each person, and the how to make religion and spirituality a continually improving adventure. Now, the nuts and the bolts to creative theology are based upon what I call godly quality management. And in my book, In Search of Quality, Principles and Mechanisms, I detail step by step the principles, the mechanisms, the tools, the techniques, the strategies, the specific ways of doing it, so that we can actually implement creative theology based upon powerful principles that then are put into action by specific mechanisms. Godly quality management. And the idea here is not just to use slogans to beat people up. It's to strike to the heart of the matter of each person, both leadership and the members who are under the leaders, so that we can go beyond things that are vague, things that are insulting, to effective tools, effective mechanisms, effective techniques, effective strategies for really best getting to where you want to go. Now, this really is different from a lot of theology and a lot of traditional religions. But I make the case that the founders of those great religions and movements and spirituality and growth over the millennia, that the founders would agree with what I'm presenting in creative theology. Now, as a Christian, I make the specific case that the real Jesus was a creative theologist, worthy of being followed today. Because the real Jesus did not come to earth just to make us comfortable, but he came to transform our hearts. He came to demand that we not only believe what he said, but do as he did. He came to us to implement radical teachings and wishes for us to adopt godly quality management, that we may together work to express the creativity of God. And the details of that are in my book, The Real Jesus. Now, backing up The Real Jesus are 10 more books. And these are books that I wrote with the idea, what would Jesus say today if he were to return for a brief inspection of how his people are doing in carrying out his teachings? What would Jesus say? So in the first person, my fictional book has Jesus speaking to us and then explaining exactly what happened behind key passages in the New Testament, and telling us who said what, where, and when, and what were the things, and how was it moving. So, in my books, Jesus talks to us in the first person and helps us to understand, based upon New Testament scriptures, understand what really is the kingdom of God. What is it really? And how should it be implemented today? And what's it got to do with our hearts, and how do we change our hearts to not just be robotically following some teachings, but to have it change us? And all this has to do with what I call the Church of Godly Creativity. That I make the case that Jesus was working to have us really be, by his teachings, being implemented in the hearts of people. And so, in the third book, Jesus talks about dealing with difficult people. And this is really where we come to some key aspects of the Church of Godly Creativity and creative theology, because it has to do with how we relate to each other, and that we discover a profound connectivity that goes beyond just you and me and our tribe and our nation, but it extends out to the universe and to God and to nature even. And then in the fourth book, I see Jesus speaking to us about godly love, not just as a vague emotion, but to operationally define godly love as another key aspect of creative theology, and to extend it beyond just fuzzy emotion but sincere actions that have to do with expressing godly love. And this operational definition is the basis of creative theology. Now, to get there, we need to master true compassion. So here I see Jesus talking to us again about how to operationally define it. How does it really look like in action? And to understand that this is a difficult thing. That is a test that God is putting upon us. And that it relates again to connectivity. It all relates to us working together in the best possible ways. And Jesus talks about building a synergistic crystal cathedral, a living monument to the glory of God. And how do we do that? We do it by capitalizing on this profound connectivity. And then in the seventh book of the series of the Jesus Lectures, Jesus now turns to talking about God and what really is God. What is true godliness? And once again, it comes back to creativity. It comes back to the basis of creative theology and acquiring the best motivations for wanting to move closer and closer to God. And then in the 8th book, Jesus says, how do you want your life to be meaningful? And goes through examples and talks about these examples in detail. And they have to do with a very clear examination of our lives, of what we do, of how we think, of figuring out in a very focused manner what is it we're trying to achieve. And are we doing it? And how are the methods that we're using working? And can they work better? And how do we determine that so that we can learn not just a superficial set of information, but always be learning deeper, wider, higher, more complex, and more substantial, so that we can continually improve in what? In everything that we do for God. This is a very challenging book. And then in my 9th book, Jesus turns to the subject of damnation, that which God does not want. And it goes beyond just a superficial listing of sins, but it goes to the positive of doing the things that we need to do that will push out the negatives. And the very first thing is exercising a tremendous gift that God has given us, which is a spark of divine creativity in each one of us. And that creativity is not just an explosion that can destroy all sorts of other things, but it's all within the limits of the 5 godly fundamental principles that bound it and contain it and help it to be godly creativity. And if we do that, we can move beyond this terrible thing called success. And we can empower and facilitate ourselves and others to work together to attempt to achieve tremendous things that bring us great satisfaction, that bring us honor, and that bring us great enjoyment in this life. That's how to avoid damnation. And finally, in the last book of the series, Jesus then says, okay, you have salvation, but cherish it. Cherish it. How? How do you do that? How do you do that? Well, here's what Jesus says. Move beyond carrots and sticks so that you can have the best motivation. So that you can undertake a wonderful, never-ending adventure to get closer to God that works with other people in a very positive way as they help you and you help them to build this incredibly beautiful crystal cathedral to God's glory. That's not just some intangible concept, but it's real, it's physical, it's tangible. And that forms the basis of creative theology. And all those books are available at my website, lylepublishing.com, if you'd like to look at them in more detail. So, if you have comments, questions, or concerns regarding the basis of creative theology from the short video, I welcome your feedback. Please email me at danlyle@lylepublishing.com, which is my address. And I thank you for viewing the second of these 5 videos, and I invite you to look at the remaining 3.